You know, they often say that there are taboo subjects that you shouldn't talk about in church: money, sex, religion, politics, but I don't think there is any taboo subject. I think we should be addressing all topics to do with life. And so this morning, I want to look at the issue of budgeting or finance or management today. So let's begin with Proverbs 17:18. It is poor judgment to guarantee another person's debts. Poor judgment, or to put up security for a friend. And in 22:7, the poor are always ruled over by the rich, so don't borrow and put yourself under their power. Just 2 verses from Proverbs, but 2 verses that I can speak for a lot of people I know that if they had read them, understood them, and put them into practice, would have saved themselves an awful lot of grief. A member of the family needs to buy a house, a car, some whiteware, or even raise money for a business. And you, the caring parent, uncle, aunt, good friend, or whatever, you can make it happen for them simply by signing a piece of paper and guaranteeing the loan. Why wouldn't you do it? It's a loving thing to do, isn't it? And so you read, and so you sign that paper. And a few months later, your relative or friend stops making the payments. And before you know it, the lender comes knocking on your door, because by signing that piece of paper, you guarantee to make good the loan. And so often, in these circumstances, people end up forking out huge sums of money in principal and interest, as well as other fees and charges for items that they'll never see. And in worst case scenarios, they can have lost, they can lose their homes, and they can end up declaring bankruptcy. Proverbs 17:18. It is poor judgment to guarantee another person's debt or to put up security for a friend. No, no, I think you should stay. Proverbs tells us very clearly that it is poor judgment, I'm sorry, Verna, that it is a foolish thing to do to guarantee someone else's debt. The point being that if they'd listened to the advice of Proverbs, they could have avoided that situation. But I know why people do it. Because it's relatives, it's family, and you love them and you care for them and you want to help them. So why shouldn't you be guarantor for a loan? Surely it's the loving thing to do. Well, sometimes, in very rare cases, it might be. But in most cases, it's not. Because all you're actually teaching the person asking for the loan is actually some very bad principles about life and finance, such as instant gratification is okay. It's, in other words, if you want it now, you should be able to have it. That's what you're teaching them. That it's okay to go into debt for things that if you waited a while and saved for, you could have had a lot cheaper. Do you really need it right now? That it's okay to shift responsibility for your own personal debt to someone else. That's never okay. That it's okay to live beyond your means. And all of these are bad principles, financial or otherwise, to live by, and ones that will often result in an individual or a family being stuck in an endless cycle of poverty for their entire lives. The key thing to know is actually this about going guarantor for a loan, is that if a lender is asking for a guarantor for a loan, they are doing so because in their best professional opinion, they think that the borrower will have difficulty in repaying the loan. And instead of ethically saying as much to the borrower and saying, you really can't afford this, I'm not going to sell you this item because you can't afford to pay back the loan, they instead try and get a guarantor on board to cover the loan, plus the interest, fees and charges. So if the borrower thinks the person is a bad risk, the lender, thinks the person is a bad risk, shouldn't that send a signal to you? Proverbs 17:18. It's poor judgment to guarantee another person's debt or to put up security for a friend. And without going into too much detail, the other verse from Proverbs 22:7 paints a similar picture of wise advice ignored at peril. The poor, it says, are always ruled over by the rich. So don't borrow. Don't borrow and put yourself under their power. Loan sharks, as we call them today, and hire purchase companies like DTR are the curse of poorer families, where with words like, and I went on the website to look at it a couple of days ago, words like easy cash, easy loan, easy rent, flexible payments, And with all of these words, people are seduced by the lure of owning the very latest flat screen TV, appliances and furniture immediately, and often end up paying, and I've worked it out with them at times, sat down and added it up, they end up paying 5 times the purchase price of what it would have cost them if they bought it direct from the store. And if they default, as often they do, the item is repossessed and they still have to pay back the money they borrowed, losing twice over. The poor, Proverbs 22:7, are always ruled over by the rich. So don't borrow and put yourself under their power. If there was simply a willingness to wait and save the amount that they're spending on the weekly repayments, often within the 9 months to a year, they would have had enough money to purchase the item outright with no debt. And yet people lack financial discipline. So they either do not save, or if they begin to save, and they start to see a few dollars creeping up in their account, they suddenly think, oh, I've got some dollars. And they forget about the thing that maybe they were saving for, the new fridge or whatever, and then they go and impulse spend it on other things. The Bible is full of advice on living, including on managing your money. So why is it important to talk about money management today? Some of you might think, well, that's not really an appropriate topic for a sermon, but I think it is. Because it can save a lot of people a lot of grief if they can learn some basic money management. Because a lot of people I know personally have struggled and do struggle in this area. And it's also important to talk about it because good money management is a reflection of how the Spirit of God is at work in you, developing the fruits of the Spirit. I'm thinking of fruits of the Spirit like self-control and patience. They're fruits of the Spirit. Self-control and patience in every area of life, including financial management. No impulse buying. Love. That's a fruit of the Spirit. Tough love in particular, that says to the relative wanting you to go guarantor for them, no, I'm not going to. It's a bad idea what you want to do. Actually, what about you and I instead set up an untouchable savings plan for this thing that you want, whereas you give me the amount of money you were going to put away into this line, I'll hold it for you in an account where you can't touch it, and when it gets to the right amount, I'll give it to you, and you can go and buy this item, and you'll be earning interest along the way. That's love, tough love. And then there's generosity. That's the fruit of the Spirit, whereby managing your money well, you have the ability to give to others, and so bless them and be blessed in the giving. It's a blessing to be able to give. And lastly, and this is really important, because how you spend your money reflects what you value. How you spend your money reflects what you value, what you see as important. Do you mainly spend your money on yourself? Does your spouse struggle to manage the household because what you earn is yours and what they earn is theirs? Instead of having joint accounts and seeing it maybe as our money? Do you give to enable the work of the church? And if not, why not? As a disciple of Christ, your first priority in life is to serve God and then our families. For the ancient Israelites, the first part of their earnings, the first part of their earnings, or the harvest, was called a tithe, and it was given to the temple, to the Levites, for the work of God, along with a promise that they would not go without if they did so. And it was interesting hearing Lexia share in the service this morning about how when she and Simon were both earning reasonable incomes, they were always struggling to have enough to make ends meet. And they realised that actually they weren't giving, they weren't tithing, they weren't giving to the church. And so they said, no, we've got to do that first. And the minute they put that into place, they had enough. And they said the funny thing was that even when their income dropped down to just one income, they still had enough. It seems to be a principle that when you give to God, that a lot of the other financial struggles you might be having actually start to come right. And I can testify that too as well. Nikki and I have got a very similar testimony where we've always chosen to give to God first and then other things happen. And it's always worked out for us. There are 3 key things that you need to know for successful money management. And I might be, teaching people to suck eggs here, but here we go. There are 3 key things you need to know for successful money management. They are budget, Budget and budget. Sorry for that. You were going to write down 3 separate things, weren't you? And honestly, I can't state that clear enough. You will never ever manage your money well unless you have a budget. Without a budget, you will be condemned to day, hand-to-mouth living. You will make financial decisions with no idea of whether or not you can afford them. You will be seduced into impulse buying, live beyond your means, and continue to struggle through a lot of life. Budget. With a budget, you will be able to take control of your finances. You will reduce debt. You will begin to save. You will gain some security for later life. And you will even achieve small gains like holidays and so on. So how do you make a budget? Very simply. And there are a lot of tools on the internet and agencies around who can help you with this, but very simply, you take a piece of paper and you write down all your sources of regular income, work them out to a weekly basis, then you note down all your sources of expenditure, food, power, rent, bills, petrol, insurance, car registration, warrants, school fees, mortgage, church giving, pocket money. There's a big list. That's the hardest part. Where does it stop? You also work those out on a weekly basis. You subtract the expenses from the income, and if you've got money left over, which is hard often, if you've got money left over, then you're living within a budget, and with that money that's left over, you can decide to do something with the rest. First thing I'd say you do with it is retire debt. Get rid of debt first, because you're paying more interest on your debt than what you'll get if you put it into savings. Get rid of debt first. Then put some into savings once you've got rid of your debt. Short-term savings for holidays or something you might need or want as a family, or maybe thinking long-term like retirement savings. If your expenses exceed your income, and this is often the case, what do? Well, you've got 2 things. You've either got to reduce your expenses or increase your income. There are a lot of ways people can reduce expenditure. A lot of ways people don't even think about. There are a lot of things we spend money on that we don't need to. Pokies, gambling, cigarettes, junk food. Maybe there are magazine subscriptions that you don't need. Maybe you can try carpooling, or maybe cycling instead of driving. There are cheaper power companies if we shop around. There are sometimes cheaper rents. There are places we can go for cheaper clothing. Change your phone plan, get rid of your phone. Change your bank plan. There are cheaper bank plans. Pay your bills like insurance yearly instead of monthly. There's always an administration cost that goes with monthly payments. Increasing your income is a little harder. It might require, if it's available, for you to find extra work, but it's not always available. I know we live in a tough economic climate at the moment, and I know there are a lot of people in this community who are struggling to make ends meet. And it is hard to find extra work. But one of the ways, if you can, a few hours of extra work. Or possibly you might come across a job which actually pays a slightly higher wage rate, maybe transfer into that. Wins allowances that you might actually not be aware of, and so on. And once you've got your budget to that balanced position, it's recommended by the experts that you set up 3 accounts. Number 1 is for all your fixed regular payments like rent, mortgage, phone, food, power, insurance, debt reduction, and so on. All of those expenses that are going to be regular expenses that you pay out, work out what they're going to cost you on a weekly basis, and make sure that amount of money goes into this one account, and you don't ever touch that account for anything other than those bills. The best way, in fact, is to set up automatic payments so that that money comes out automatically. And you know, the really exciting thing is that if you do this kind of thing, is that because there's so many bills that come out, the amount of money that you're putting in there actually begins to build up. And you might think, well, I've got money to spend. No, you don't. But what it is, it's called cash flow. As that money builds up, because not all bills fall due at the same time, it means that there's enough money to cover the other bills, so you can get to the point where you can pay them on a yearly basis instead of monthly. And what you actually end up doing, because the balance is higher, is actually you end up earning a little bit of interest instead of paying it to the bank. The second account is for savings, which is where, if you've got a little bit of spare money, you put some money aside for a savings goal, for the future, for whatever that might be. And the third account is for anything left over, which may be used for irregular expenses like medical bills, school expenses, and so on, camps, things that you just don't know when they're going to come up. I'm a very organised person, as you might know, And I estimate even what my irregular expenses might be, and I keep them also in that one account, and I run a ledger system where I know exactly to the dollar where I'm at. So I know I have a special column called Def Cred that goes up and down, and I know exactly where I'm at. But it enables me to have the benefits of having that higher balance in that one account, and therefore to be able to pay things on a yearly basis and so on. Here's a couple of other tips around budgeting and account management. This is really important. Reduce and avoid debt as much as possible. Remember the proverb, the borrower is always under the power of the rich. Reduce and get rid of debt as quick as possible, because you're paying higher interest on debt than what you'll get for your savings. Number 2, destroy credit cards and work by cash or EFTPOS only. Last night there was a news item on TV3, I think it was on TV1 as well, talking about credit card debt in New Zealand. Only, and I think I heard this right, only 8% of people with credit cards in New Zealand pay off the amount that's due at the end of the month. Only 8%. That's horrendous. 92% of people are living with the higher interest that comes with credit cards. 8%. If you can't manage a credit card, and that will be evidenced by the fact that you don't pay it off every month, get rid of it. Clear that debt as soon as possible and get rid of it. Don't run a credit card. Transparency, number 3, transparency with couples. Now, Nikki and I, we felt when we got married that marriage is a union in every area of life. We don't have separate accounts. There's one account for us, or 2 accounts. There's a joint account and then there's a savings account. But basically 2 accounts that are ours. And everything is ours. Her income, my income, it all goes into the one account. There's no such thing as her money, his money. It's our money. And we make all the decisions together. There's got to be transparency like that. You know, one of the number 1 reasons marriages fail, they often say when you start talking to couples, is actually, it's not just fights about the colour of the curtains, it's also fights about their money. It's about the money. Or squeezing the toothpaste tube in the middle or something like that. It's important that there's a little bit of his and her money, for pocket money, so to speak. And if he wants to buy stuff for her camera, and I've got things I like, but the main money for running the house should be joint money. Emergency funding. Always have an emergency fund set aside. Most people, or most recommendations are that you have about a month's income. A month's income to cover all of your expenses if something happened, illness, or you lose your job, or something like that. Have at least a month's backstop. And I know that's really hard for a lot of people to get to that place, but that's what's recommended. Life insurance. If you've got kids, you better have life insurance, because if one of you dies, who's going to look after the kids? Who? The other one, that's right. But that means possibly they won't be able to work because they're going to have to be at home looking after them. They'll need a source of income. If you've got a house, make sure it's insured. 7, save towards retirement. KiwiSaver is a great way of doing it, but make sure you're putting a little bit extra away. And lastly, there are a lot of places you can go that will be keen to help you. That website, you know, the one with the mouse on TV, www.sorted.org.nz, it's great. Lots and lots of help on there. Online budget planning, stuff about retirement, articles on everything you can think of. It's a good start. And there are Christian agencies as well. Ones like CAP, Christians Against Poverty, very good agency. Baptist Financial Services and others. There are a lot of places you can go, and there'll be a lot of people here in this church too who've got wisdom in this area if you're struggling in it and would like a little bit of help. But if you're not one of the 8%, don't do it. Let us pray. But afterwards, we can keep talking. And seriously, I am very aware that there are some people, because of levels of income, where they do really struggle to make ends meet. And you know, we are here to help you with that. Quite happy to talk with people about budgeting and things like that. Let's pray. Father, it does reflect what we value in the way we handle our money, and it does reflect the character of Christ that's been developed within us. I pray for every one of us here, Lord, that we would reflect Christ-likeness in the way that we handle our money, and that we might reflect it to the community around us. And we ask for this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're going to move into